Hello, today we're going to talk about deontology. Deontology is one of the more important major normative ethical theories, and one like virtue theory that's been around for quite some time. Essentially, it is to distinguish it from the character-based model, which bases right and wrong on a sense of one's well-being or character. The deontological model uses rules or principles. A way of thinking about that is that the root of the word deontos means a duty or a binding rule. In this way, many of the great world traditions of religion are deontological. They have prescriptions that govern or regulate behavior that are framed in universal rules of or principles. So, for example, take the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, which says, to choose just one of them, that thou shalt not kill. It doesn't give you exceptions for that. It's universal, and it's meant to be followed. You have duties and obligations irrespective of how you feel. You may be very angry at a person, for example, but to the point of wanting to perhaps harm or kill them, but you can't do that, right? Because you have a duty to and an obligation to discharge the rule. Now, these kinds of claims in ethics then center the focus on our duties and obligations. And another way of viewing someone who might be a deontologist or a rule-based moralist is that they're not going to be using words quite like virtue theorists, words like courage or uh, integrity or trustworthiness, but they're going to be talking about obligations and duties to things, rules, principles. One ought to do something. Now, it begins with the great Chinese philosopher Kung Fu Tzu, who most of us know in his Latinized name, Confucius, who in the Analects, when asked by one of his followers, was asked how one should be a good person. And he said that one should do unto others as one would always have done unto. And this, of course, is the famous golden rule. He's going to articulate a contrary position known as the silver rule, which says do not do to others what you do not want done to you. Now, what's some rather fascinating about that particular claim is that it's going to percolate through all world religions from China in the 6th century and be a universal principle found in many cultures today. The thing that we're going to be looking at, though, to really get our mind wrapped in and to understand this is the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who in his book on ethics, Critique of Practical Reason, will tell us that what we're looking for is a rational conception here that the only thing that is unqualifiedly good, he will claim, is the good will. And the will is the part of your human faculties that follows rules and initiates behaviors in the world. One wills something, one makes something happen, and your will needs to follow reason rather than whim, caprice, or emotion or desire. And the reason why is because rules are going to be universal and applicable beyond and not merely just geared to the moment. A desire is something that once it's sated, you're going to forget about it. So if you're thirsty and you slake your thirst by drinking, then the thirst is not an issue anymore, and you may do other things. And whereas a rule is going to be something that, because it's rational, is going to be extended beyond just the one time and you'll have to follow it all the time. In this sense, the will, which takes its dictates from reason, is going to be looking for a principle to guide all of its behaviors. And through many hundreds of very abstract and thoughtful prose, Kant presents something he calls his categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is a universal rule. It's categorical. It cuts across all categories. And it's an imperative, so it has some kind of grammatical force. And as such, he's going to articulate two versions of that. One version is going to tell us that you should never do or will anything that, unless your maxim, the rule, can be a universal law. This is his famous principle of universalizability. A test for universalizability might be to ask yourself when you're about to commit an action if nearly everybody else would do that if they were in the same situation. When you think about it, something like cheating is a wonderful example, even though you may come across, say, the test bank to a calculus exam you're about to take, and no one knows you have it. and there's every reason for you to cheat, you won't get caught, you have to ask not that you should cheat in that particular exam, but would anybody cheat if they're given the same advantage? And if you feel there's a kind of conflict there that no, it's not the appropriate thing to do, then it fails the test of universalizability and can't be the moral thing. Now, Kant is also going to articulate this notion of the categorical imperative in another sense. And here he's going to be a little more concrete. In this more concrete version, he's going to tell us to always treat rational beings or humans as ends in themselves and never as merely means to an end. And this is a really important point, and one that's going to echo through the centuries in medical ethics in particular, because at heart is when you affirm a person's rational autonomy, when you respect them, you're treating them as an end instead of using them towards some good that they may not agree to, which would be to treat a person like a means. Now, if you treat a person like an end, what you're doing is subscribing to what Kant had argued was really the underpinnings of moral behavior, and this is the notion of autonomy. Autonomy, or autonomos, or self-ruling, is the position that you ascribe to a person when they're engaged in their rulemaking on their own. So we assume that people are rational agents and that the decisions they make are in their own best interests, right? So in the medical field, we usually call this the rational decision making, and that is autonomy. And as long as a person doesn't have any mitigating circumstance that overrides their rational decision-making aspects, then they have that capacity, then whatever they say is going to be the final word. Of course, you can try to convince a person otherwise, but you can't force them. You can't override their autonomy. Autonomy operates in this sense as a deep sense of respect. One respects a person's rational decision-making capacities, the choices they make, because they are, after all, their own private rulemaker or sovereign. Now, in this kind of ethics, we're going to be looking at rules and principles, and not the kind of person we perceive ourselves to be. You could feel pretty rotten at the end of the day doing the right thing as a deontologist, but you know you've done the right thing. You've had the duty or the obligation, you've discharged the duty, and you've done what you believe is the right thing. All right, so that's deontology, rule or principle-based ethics.